Hi, I'm Dr. Hockman, the medical matchmaker, and I'm really excited today. I have Dr. Emilio Justo. I'm going to let Dr. Justo introduce himself a little bit because he's got some cool stuff that he's done.
Well, thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity of being here and joining you and your audience, which I value greatly. So in a nutshell, if there can be a nutshell, I've had a diverse life. I came to the United States with my parents at the tender age of 3 as a Cuban refugee fleeing Fidel Castro's communist regime. My parents and I first landed in Gary, Indiana, of all places. So we did not come via Miami, as most of you might think. And as we were in Gary, my father was working 2 full-time jobs. My mother, who had her doctorate in education from the University of Havana, went 3 hours south to restudy at Indiana University in Bloomington. My grandparents, who came over a few months later, were relocated to a small college town in northwest Missouri called Tarkio College, Missouri. My parents made the difficult and courageous decision to send me away to grow up with my grandparents from kindergarten through the end of 4th grade. So I lived on the campus in a dorm room with my grandparents from kindergarten through 4th grade. And then in 5th grade, we all reunited back in Indiana after my parents had established themselves, saved up some money to purchase a home. And my mother was then teaching high school Spanish. My father was working as a steel worker at U.S. Steel. And that's where I did my growing up from 5th grade through the end of high school. In high school, I had a medical crisis during my freshman year, which we may or may not get to later, but it really taught me the power of resilience, perseverance, and other such variables. And then as a result, I was blessed and fortunate to become valedictorian of our graduating high school class, which set me off on a journey towards getting into the University of Michigan's accelerated 6-year pre-medical medical program. So I finished medical school at the age of 23, did 4 years of residency in ophthalmology and oculoplastic surgery, finished at 27, and that's when I came out to sunny Phoenix, Arizona, where I established my private practice. And this is now my 36th year in practice, still practicing full-time, 50 hours a week. And last but not least, a little over a year ago, I decided to venture on a new journey. Because Laura, one of the things that perhaps you'll face as you get older, since you're obviously younger than me, is as we get older and perhaps a little wiser, we start looking at our life and pondering what our life's been about and what our life will leave behind as a legacy. And I have 3 still relatively young kids, 13, 17, and 20. And I wanted to kind of leave my stamp, my legacy, other than just being a physician and surgeon, which I've been very proud and blessed to be. I ventured into the world of the TEDx stage. And in August of 2023, I delivered my first TEDx talk on delayed gratification, your superpower to success. That TEDx talk, I guess, went viral, did very well with millions of views. And as a result, I decided to write my first book, The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, which was released a few months ago. And then I also decided to do my second TEDx talk this year on unleashing the drive within, the obsession advantage to unprecedented success. And that YouTube video is doing very well. Also, it has over 2.5 million views in just a few short months. My first TEDx has over 6.5 million views. And so I'm just kind of doing a different journey. I'm doing some keynote speaking, just trying to get out in public, teach the younger generation some pearls of wisdom that I've learned since my kids, I'm not sure if they really digest everything I'm telling them. They say they do, but sometimes I don't see that in their actions. But that's in a nutshell, that's my journey, Laura. And it's one that if I had to do all over again, notwithstanding all the mistakes and all the incredible failures that I've had in my life, which along with all my blessings, I've had incredible failures, which I still consider to be blessings because they are what have made me who I am today.
That's great. It's so funny you say you don't know if your kids are listening or not. Number one, they probably are, but even if they don't show it yet. But also, I feel like you have to be ready. You have to be wanting to be willing to learn. The obstacles that you faced are the way forwards. I don't know if you've read Ryan Holiday. The obstacle is the way. But absolutely, and I think your parents having gone through what they did and making it out, and it couldn't have been easy for them to send you to your grandparents. What incredible parents. I want to
Yes,
talk
yes.
today about delayed gratification. So this is what your TED Talk is about. It's what your book is about, the power of pause. So let's just start with, what is pause? We're talking about the power of the, here's my accent coming out, power of the pause. Power of the pause. My kids would make fun of me here. Um, how would you define a pause? What is a pause?
Well, a pause is just simply taking a break and stepping back and reevaluating the circumstance that one is in. So, for example, when faced with the possibility of an immediate gratification, a temptation, let's call it, by pausing and thinking about that, and maybe waiting a few days, maybe waiting a week, and then thinking about it all over again, I think what we find in general, most often, not always, but most often, is that when we pause and we think about it again, that temptation is far, far less, right? But right in the heat of the moment, it's very easy to get emotionally carried away and want that instant gratification. And I think if we withhold that immediate pleasure, that immediate temptation in favor of a later, which is oftentimes greater reward, it can be exponentially so much better. But we really have to make those initial steps. We need to be able to pause, and that's the challenge that we all have, including myself.
It's interesting. I was just thinking while you're talking, is this is what marketing goes after. It's all about, buy it now, get it now before it lasts, because they know that once
Right.
you stop and you pause, you're going to make a different decision because you're going to be
Absolutely.
more thoughtful. I mean,
Yes.
literally
Yes,
thoughtful.
marketing, I think, is all about creating a sense of urgency, right? So
Yes.
you need it now. You got to have it now. If you don't get it now, something bad's going to happen. The price is going to go up. It's going to be out of stock. What have you? And you got to be able to just pause and walk away and ponder it and reflect on what truly matters most. And that's one of the things I talk about in one of my TEDx talks is reflect on what truly matters most. Write it down. Keep it as a visible reminder of your long-term vision. Then after you pause like that, then let's say you decide to go forward with whatever this goal, aspiration, etc. Well, then you create a structured plan, right? You create a plan to achieve your goal. And if necessary, you break that plan down into smaller, more manageable steps. And then once you do that, you chart your progress regularly and then celebrate along the way, Laura. It's so important to celebrate those small milestones and achievements because it gives us, a powerful reinforcement. It re-energizes us. And then finally, we have to practice what I call that mindful decision making, right? And so when we're faced with the temptation of an immediate reward, the mindful decision making is where we pause and then consider the consequences, right? What are the consequences? Are the consequences going to affect our long-term vision and our long-term goal? And then embrace the self-discipline to actually set ourselves in the correct path and use the wisdom that hopefully we've gathered to go on the correct path toward our long-term goal.
The easiest time to think about this really is coming out of training. When we think about, we've been holding our breath for all of college and med school and residency, and then we get the doctor job. So then, so many of us go out and buy the doctor car and the doctor house and the doctor dog. I don't know, all the doctor things. I don't know what.
Right, right,
And,
right.
and
Sure.
And really, if you think about what you're talking about of making that list, really make a list of what's truly, truly important to you. This is something that I also talk about a lot is what are your actual values? You and I were chatting before we went live about my work hours. I do all this stuff full time, but I work clinically part time because I took a lot of time and a lot of thought to think, what are my values? And my values are very strongly pointing to me towards time with my kids. I don't have too much time left with them before they're at the house. I'm older than I look. But, you know, because of that, I live more frugally because that's not where my values lie. I don't care about all the doctor vacations and the doctor. Now, I do want to learn about how to do the credit card strategy for, you know, getting the good flights and good hotels and all that. But it's that delayed gratification that really I feel like helps me live a fuller life where when I'm on my deathbed, hopefully in my very old age, I'm going to look back and say, I got to spend time with my kids. I got to, this morning I went to my kids' school. They had a culture fair and, we participated. And those are the things that I want to be doing with my life. And I wouldn't have been able to do it had I not used delayed gratification. I mean, yesterday I saw this beautiful rock formation in a friend of mine's backyard. And I was like, I want that. And I turned to my husband. I'm like, we need that. And then I came home and I'm like, wait, hold on. Or I would like to retire a year earlier. so so
Right.
it's very much that like delayed gratification it's hard, but yeah.
It's very difficult, and for your doctors in the audience, right, that they can appreciate when exactly what you were saying. You come out of residency, you want the doctor's stuff, but one of the things that I preach to medical students and to residents and those who are in practice but just starting out is I say, really resist those big temptations. I know it's so difficult, but I resisted them. I still had what I think are relatively nice things, but I didn't go overboard. I reinvested. So when I was in my early years of practice, the first 10 to 15 years of my practice, keep in mind, I'm in my 36th year now, the first 10 to 15 years, I just took home a very, very meager salary, and I reinvested in my practice, in terms of getting the best equipment, getting the best technology, getting the best staff, putting in a human resources plan where I could, provide for my staff who would be happy. And here to this day, I probably have at least 8 staff members that have been with me for 25 plus years. So I think it worked because I placed the value on my staff and my profession rather than on my personal life as far as the material things. Now, I will confess, Laura, and my family will tell you this, that it's really been in the last 10 years that I've started letting go a little bit. And, I've put in a lot of sacrifice, a lot of discipline over the years. And so I have allowed myself to get some of those, more immediate gratification little benefits, fancy car, this, that, the other. So when I preach about delayed gratification, keep in mind that it doesn't mean that there's no role for instant gratification. I'm not saying instant gratification is a negative or bad thing. It just means that we need to put things in context and we need to prioritize and look at the big picture, what's really going to pay off in our life. And I respect what you're doing as a mother or a parent and spending time with your kids. I will readily admit that I do try to, if it's something important that's going on at school, I do block my work schedule to attend that. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon how you look at it, my wife is the one who steps up to do the majority of the things, drive our daughter to school. Our other boys are old enough that they can now drive themselves. So I am more devoted to the practice, and perhaps I've missed out a little bit on the kids. Hopefully not too much, but I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and everyone has a different journey. What do you feel like, there's so many different avenues of getting everywhere and so many different challenges. What challenges have you had, or what have you had to overcome to really be able to live the life of, delayed gratification? What sacrifices have you made to allow you to be at this point where you feel like, I'm good, I can make those, I can get the nicer car, I can do the things that I've delayed gratification all this time to get these things?
Well, let me walk you through a few, if I may. I'll go back to my early years just to briefly tell you about the delayed gratification, if you will, and the resilience and perseverance in high school. So, in midway through my freshman year of high school, and I was attending a parochial school, um, I was developing one of the most severe cases of what's known as acne conglobata. You may have heard of it. It's not the run-of-the-mill acne that you see teenagers with. And I was under the care of a dermatologist, but no matter what he was doing, it was just getting progressively worse. On top of that, I developed this fever of unknown origin where I had a persistent fever for over a month that didn't go away. And here I was as a freshman. I'd be sitting in the classroom, Laura, and this is no exaggeration. I'd be sitting there. The acne was so bad, I would literally have pus running down my face. What an embarrassment, right? In front of your classmates, teachers, girls that you're trying to impress. I mean, it's just terrible. So finally, after that fever and after that severe acne, I was hospitalized at Children's Memorial Hospital at Northwestern University in Chicago. And they were doing scan after scan. They did bone marrow biopsies. I mean, they did everything. They were looking for some sort of insidious cancer inside of me. And after weeks of testing, they finally determined that it was the acne conglobata that was the root of my problem. So I was in the hospital for 2.5 months. I had 3 major facial surgeries, including, debridement, dermabrasion, skin grafts, etc. When I was discharged home, finally fever-free, but scarred forever. But nonetheless, that delay taught me to develop a certain resilience. And while in the hospital bed, my parents would take turns commuting back and forth to home in Indiana, about an hour away, to get my homework every day. And I would do my best to keep up on homework, even though I wasn't in the classroom. And this is back in the 1970s, Laura, well before you were born. And so, we didn't have computers, we didn't have virtual learning. And I was still I was so devoted to my academics that, again, I was able to persevere and become valedictorian, but it wasn't because I was a bookworm. I was involved in all sorts of school clubs. I was highly involved in athletics, the baseball team, the basketball team, etc. So I developed that sense of resilience, which I feel is defined in my world. I define it as strength through adversity. And so I had that adversity. So that's the first thing in my life. Now, as I went into my professional years, midway through my career, probably 15 or so years into my career, I made some really, really stupid decisions, Laura. I abandoned my delayed gratification mantra that was ingrained inside of me through my upbringing. And, I went to some of these seminars. This was back when real estate was becoming hot. If you remember, in the early 2000s, real estate was a hot commodity. The prices were going up. And I went to this seminar and I got swept up into this whole thing. And my wife just kept trying to slow me down, but I wouldn't listen. And so within 12 months, Laura, I acquired 20 residential real estate properties.
Whoa.
The problem is that they weren't cash flowing, right? They weren't cash flowing. And so what the heck was I thinking, right? I was just an idiot, a moron. Call it as it is, right? I mean, there's just no excuse.
Right before the 2008 crash, too.
Yeah. So basically, this was just dragging me down, and it was bleeding my pocketbook. And finally, little by little, I decided that I had to do what my wife suggested and start getting rid of those properties as quickly as I could. And boy, it literally sent me into near bankruptcy. I mean, that's how I felt, because I was just bleeding every penny of savings that I had. But it taught me to not abandon my core principle of delayed gratification. And after that, boy, I got on that delayed gratification bus, and there was no end in sight. My practice then, once I became fixated on what was important, what I was trained in, what my true passion was, right? I was trying to diversify into this other passion that wasn't really me. It was just getting caught up in the whirlwind emotions. And so after that, I mean, my practice really started skyrocketing and exponentially going higher. But I really buckled down, and I became one-on-one with the practice. I had to get a new administrator, because I found out that my administrator wasn't handling things properly. The accounts payables were backed up for months, which I had no idea. She was handling all of that. I was so hands off. I wasn't even signing the checks. Can you believe how stupid that was?
Oh, no.
And so it taught me the hard way that whether it be in a medical practice for your doctors, or whether it be in any other business, doesn't matter what it is, you have got to know everything that is going on. It is incumbent upon you to be heavily involved if you want your business to be a success. And that's what I did. So I got a new administrator. I was involved in everything. I looked over every invoice to make sure that it was correct. In addition to my administrator looking at it, I signed every check. But things turned around quickly, and finally, here in the last 10 years, I've gotten to a point in my life where I've loosened up a little bit, and I have allowed myself to have some of those luxuries, because at this point I feel like, hey, I've deserved it. I've worked hard, and I'm still working hard, right? So even though I have all this other stuff, the speaking and the TEDx and the book writing, which I was doing strictly on the weekends, I don't have any time working 50 hours a week. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I found a way, Laura.
I love that. You talked a little bit about privilege, underprivilege, and you really go into this in your book. I find your view on privilege or lack of privilege, the lack of privilege not being an obstacle to success, and how your internal versus external factors really, they kind of level the playing field. So tell me a little bit about those factors that level the playing field, and how you feel like lack of privilege is not necessarily an obstacle to conventional ways of thinking of success.
Yeah, I mean, because again, my own example, right? I wasn't born in this life with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had to work. I'm what I tell my kids proudly. I say, look, I wasn't gifted things. I didn't inherit things. I worked for everything that I've obtained in my life. So I'm proud of what I've been able to obtain myself, and what I've been able to share with my family. And so I'm the epitome of not having privilege, not having that silver spoon. And so I truly do feel, there's always, again, exceptions with everything, but I truly do feel that no matter what your background is and where you come from, and it doesn't matter your gender, ethnicity, this whole thing about privilege, I think, is overplayed. You don't have to have privilege to succeed in this life. You have to have the willingness to work hard, right? And you got to work smart too, right? There's working hard and there's working smart, a combination of both. But you have to be able to be disciplined, and that's key. For me, I'm blessed because the self-discipline just came innately. No one had to push me. My parents never had to push me to study or push me to succeed. It just came intuitively to me. So I just did it. But so you have to have the self-discipline. You have to be able to be resilient and persevere through what some people would call setbacks. I like to refer to them as temporary steps back, and then be able through that resilience to bounce forward, not bounce back, but bounce forward to overcome and achieve your goal. And then ultimately, as you're doing that, to have an obsessive drive, an obsessive drive. And this is the part that a lot of people don't get, because when I talk about obsession, which I do a lot, I'm obsessed about everything I do. I mean, you can ask my kids, you can ask my wife. I am one hell of an obsessed guy, but I'm not obsessed in a psychiatric manner. I don't have obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm obsessed. Why? Because perhaps as a stereotype, right? Cubans tend to be very passionate people, and that's probably a fair stereotype. And as a Cuban-born immigrant, I am passionate about anything and everything that I do. It doesn't matter whether it's doing surgery. It doesn't matter whether it's watching a University of Michigan football game. It doesn't matter. I am passionate in everything I do. So having that passion and that drive to achieve really fuels the soul and allows one to succeed. But while having that passion and that obsession, I have still been able, for the most part, to delay gratification. So those to me is how you overcome this lack of privilege. I mean, we can all do it. We just have to be ready, willing, and able to set our mind to it.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to be living in this country that really, the American dream that we talk about is it's really alive and well. I mean, where I grew up, that wasn't necessarily the case, and I feel so fortunate to be here because that persistence and the resilience does allow you to have so much opportunity here in the U.S. And I mean, also,
Ah,
I would say, having grown up in a different country where, we won't go into my upbringing, but I have so much appreciation. I look around at the house that I live in. I look around at that I can drive the street without worrying about getting hijacked and, not freaking. I still freak out a little bit because, I grew up in that environment. But if I were to stop at a red light, I always still stop like with plenty of space between me and the car in front of me because I had to do
right,
that
I
growing
get
up because if I didn't, and someone comes at you with a
it.
gun, where are you going to
It,
go? So
it's still not a bad idea. Even in the United States, it's still not a bad
well,
idea.
no, that's true
Depending,
for sure.
yeah,
Um,
but hey, Laura, I
but
mean,
it
I cannot agree with you anymore, because the United States of America is the land of opportunity and still is. And I just hate to see so many of our young people out there that I see in the news who are trash talking the United States and who are vandalizing it. I mean, that just hurts me to my soul, because we have more opportunities in this country than in any other country in the world. I mean, think about it. Why is it that the majority of the world wants to come to the United States of America? You don't have all these immigrants fleeing, to necessarily go into Argentina or Brazil or Uruguay or Spain or France. I mean, you might have a handful, but everyone wants to come to the United States because they know that it is the land of freedom and opportunity. And when I think back to my parents, I mean, God bless them. I mean, if I were in their shoes as an adult now, boy, could I have had that courage and conviction to do what they did, to leave everything behind. I mean, they had to leave Cuba with just the clothes on our backs. That's how we left. You were not allowed to take any material possessions whatsoever. So, I mean, would I have had that courage to do that, with a young 3-year-old child, and simply based on a hope that maybe they'll have freedom and opportunity in a new land where they'll be able to provide for their young son in his future? And that ultimately what made them do it. I mean, they didn't do it so much for themselves. My parents were always very selfless individuals. All they thought about was what was the best for me as their child. So just incredible to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you completely. I think, even with all that's going on in this country right now, and especially now, it's a very emotional time for so many of us. However, I think having lived through something different, I still am appreciative of being here. And I don't know that, I can explain it till I'm blue in the face, but I think unless you've lived through something different, um, it's hard to realize how lucky we are to be here. So
Correct.
I love America. Thank you, America.
I love the U.S. as well.
Oh, I could talk about that forever. When I first moved, all my friends would say, "So is it like the movies?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's just like the movies." Uh, um, okay, we digress. We digress. Um, okay, cool. So let's think. So just say there's a physician watching this who maybe did go out and get the doctor house and the doctor car and needs to have, the highest salary. And so now they're kind of stuck in the RVU based system, but don't want to take a salary cut to go into something that may have a better lifestyle, is scared to take that leap of faith, is scared of the unknown, is scared of, there's so many fears that come with moving jobs. And there's so many physicians that feel trapped in their jobs where they're just so unhappy, but it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, but they're
Right.
afraid of what that change could bring, or what well, I know I'm miserable here, but it's just going to be miserable everywhere. What do you have to say, when it comes to what we've been talking about, or anything else, as far as your thoughts on what do you do, what do you
Yeah,
say
and
to these people?
yeah, I mean, it's a great example because I'm sure that example that you're illustrating is an example that is ubiquitous out there in the physician community. And I would first say, look, we got to do one thing at a time. You can't do everything at once. It's just not going to work. But the first thing is that you got to take care of your house, as I call it. Not literally your house, but you got to take care of first things first, and that is make some prudent financial decisions. If you're living above your means, you got to scale back. You got to get any debt under control. Ideally, to pay off debt, have minimal debt other than maybe a home mortgage. But even an automobile, you should consider if you're having to make monthly automobile payments, maybe consider downsizing that automobile where you don't have to make payments. Then once you're living a more financially prudent life, then you need to pause. That's where the pause comes in, and reflect. Again, I go back to what I was saying earlier. Reflect on what truly matters most. Because ultimately, for you to be happy and successful, you have to have that passion within you. If you're completely unhappy in practicing the type of medicine that you are, for whatever reason, maybe you chose the wrong specialty, maybe you're in the wrong group, assuming you're in a group, maybe you're in a private practice and you should consider transitioning to a group, or vice versa. Maybe you're in a group and you should break away from the group and start your own practice, right? I'm a believer, even in today's day and age, when most of medicine is out there practicing in groups, I still would advocate and never dissuade any young physician from practicing in solo practice on their own and building their own practice. Now, is it for everyone? Absolutely not, because everything has its advantages and disadvantages. But I would never tell a young physician, oh, no, don't do that. You can't do it. There's too much competition. Never in my 36-year career have I cared at all about my competition. The only thing I cared about are my patients and providing the best personal care for them that I can with as much competency as possible. And if you treat your patients with respect and dignity, and communicate with them and not be in a rush and not having it, just be this in and out, patients will love that and they'll spread the word. And next thing you know, you have this internal marketing that's going on where people are wanting to see you. But so you have to do one thing at a time. But if you're stuck in medicine and you've found out that, man, you really just hate medicine, period, doesn't matter what specialty, okay, well, then maybe that's the time where you start rethinking and you start self-educating yourself. Self-education is key, right? I think you would agree, Laura. It's not all about book work and going to a fancy school, but it's self-educating, read books, listen to audiobooks. By the way, my book I narrated it. It's on Audible for those of you in the audience. The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success. Nice little plug there. But listen to audiobooks, and maybe that's a time to transition into a different sphere, right? I mean, you've been very successful transitioning and having a nice hybrid lifestyle where you still practice medicine and then you help physicians find practices, et cetera. So it can be done, but you've got to pause. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to really think about things, prioritize, and set those goals like I talked about, and then kind of chart your progress. And it's okay as you're navigating to change. You don't have to be on this straight and narrow path that you can't deviate. I think that is a road you don't necessarily want to take. It's not the shortest distance between A and B. You might want to go from A to C, C to X, X to W, and then W to B. And that's okay. There's a little experimentation involved, but I think it can be done. But ultimately, for any one of us, physician or not, to be happy and truly successful, we need to have the passion inside of us of what we're doing. Otherwise, we're never going to be happy.
Yeah, being narrow-minded really served us well when it was about becoming a physician. But as soon as you're done with training, then you need to flip that from, being just very tunnel visioned, get through training to have that flexibility. And that's a hard switch to make.
It is. I remember when I finished medical school and residency, one of my good friends at University of Michigan, he did an ENT residency, right, at the so-called famous Mayo Clinic. And he did that residency and he just hated it. He didn't even finish. I think his last year, he decided to do a pathology residency. And that's what ultimately made him happy. And that's what he's practiced ever since. So here some might say, well, he wasted a couple years in ENT. Well, you never waste anything in life because you always learn. But he made a change. And for some people, that change may occur even after residency. Once they've been in practice for a half dozen years, they may say, wow, this is not really what I expected. And there are doctors out there who will go back and do a second residency and completely change their practice. Now, is that the common thing? No. And do I recommend that for everyone? Not necessarily, but it's certainly feasible. So you really got to find what you're passionate about, what's going to bring you that internal joy and happiness within your soul, because everyone around you, whether you have family or they have spouse, children, it's going to rub off on everyone. And it's important. Speaking of that, I think it is important to always surround yourself with people who will give you good energy and good feedback and positivity. And that's not always your family. You think, oh, my family loves me, they have my best interests. Well, they do in a certain sense, but if they haven't walked in your shoes, if they haven't done those things that you yourself are trying to do, they may not be the right mentor for you, right? Someone who's actually done what you're wanting to do, if they've achieved it ahead of you, they can give you good feedback on what to do and not do. But someone who hasn't done that, you got to be careful, because they may have every good intention, but their energy may actually detract and keep you down. So you've got to be very careful. I do talk about that in one of the chapters in my book, that you've got to really surround yourself with the right mentors and the right people who will give you the proper feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go ahead and paste a link to the book in the comments as soon as we jump off. So if anyone's interested, please take a look in the comments. That will be there. Well, thank you. That was so awesome. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate all of this. And I definitely am going to go watch your TED Talks, because read the book, didn't watch the TED Talks. So it will be 6.5 million and one.
Well, make sure and click the like button, post a comment. I respond to all the comments myself. So there's a lot of comments that you'll see. And so post a comment, share with your friends. I would appreciate those numbers continuing to go up.
Absolutely. And if someone would like to have you speak at their event, where can they find you?
Yeah, so if I have a personal website, right? I have our practice website, but I've created a personal website, which is DrEmilioJusto.com, and that's spelled DrEmilioJusto.com. And in that website, there's links to the TEDx talks, links to my book, links to all sorts of podcasts and articles that I've been featured in. And there's also a contact page there. And if you fill out the contact page with any comments or questions, it goes directly to my inbox. And I'm very good at responding. So I typically, if I don't respond the very same day, I can assure you that you'll have a response within 24 hours. So that's the best way to really contact me. There's also social media links on my website, because I have the social media on most major platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. So you can follow me on social media there as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to go ahead and post the link, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. It's really my privilege and my pleasure, and I appreciate getting to know you and your audience. Thank you.
Thanks.